I, Dhruvin Mehta, Joint Secretary of ITBA and AGFTC, would like to welcome you all to the sixth session of the webinar series on income tax and GST. It's been a historic moment for all of us. For the first time, all Gujarat Federation of Tax Consultant, Chartered Accountant Association, and Income Tax Bar Association have come together and have organized this webinar series. The response from the members have been tremendous, and we have to close the registration of the webinar. Today's sixth session to be taken by our eminent speaker, Sri Dhaval Trivedi, is on one of the most crucial topic of 44AB and 44AD. And it's a question which always remain unanswered to several members. It is indeed our pleasure to have the same resolve from the expert. With this, I would like to once again welcome you all to the sixth session of this webinar series. Thank you.
Thank you, Dhruvin bhai. Now I request CA Viswas A. Shah, Honorable Secretary of All Gujarat Federation of Tax Consultants, to introduce CA Dhaval Trivedi, the speaker of today's session.
Dhaval Trivedi. I am happy to introducing Dhaval Trivedi on behalf of all the three associations. Dhaval Trivedi is the CS and CA, but he is practicing chartered accountant in the name of KC Mehta and Company. He is also experienced in working as a PwC Ahmedabad and PwC Taiwan. He is a nominated member in the International Taxation Bar Association, International Taxation Committee of WIRC and of ICAI in this year. He is the visiting faculty of ICAI in various CPE study circle chapter. Also, he is visiting lecturer in Sardar Patel University, Nirma University, HL Institute of Commerce, GNLU, and many more. He is also contributing various articles in international journal like BKR International Worldwide Bulletin, Swiss India Chamber of Commerce Bulletin, CTC, CSC, and Dhaval Bhai has many more subjective knowledge. So I request Dhaval Bhai to share his some of drops knowledge to our members. Thank you.
Just a second, Dhaval bhai. I request all the panelists to switch off their videos for the better quality, and I request all the participants to just listen carefully the views of Dhaval bhai, as this is very important topic for us for the next 2 or 3 months of our practice. Thank you so much. Dhaval bhai, please.
Sure. First of all, I would like to thank AGFTC, Chartered Accountants Association Ahmedabad, and Income Tax Bar Association for giving me this tremendous opportunity. What could be more better than having a session after Shri Girish Ahuja's session? The topic that we have today is on Section 44AB and Section 44AD. These are only 2 sections in the law, but આપણને જેમ ખબર છે એમ આ 2 સેક્શનમાં જ ઘણું બધું કવર થાય છે. So what we are going to do today is, in the next 1 hour 15 minutes, we are going to discuss about the nuances about both the sections, Section 44AB and Section 44AD. આપણા જેવા પ્રોફેશનલ્સ માટે Section 44ADA પણ ખાસું રેલેવન્ટ છે. એટલે આપણે Section 44ADA ઉપર પણ સારું એવું ડિસ્કસ કરશું. What we'll do is, we'll not try to go extremely fast, થોડા સ્લો જશું, because કારણ કે 2 sections છે અને બંને sectionમાં there is a lot of interpretation aspects which we need to take care of. એટલે what I have done is I have tried to identify certain issues. Around 1500 issues છે જે I may identify કર્યા છે for this particular session. We are not going to go into the details of Form 3CD, કારણ કે એના માટે 2 દિવસનો અલગ સેમિનાર જોશે, અને I am sure આપણે ભેગા થઈને સેશન પણ ફેસ કરશું. ADA. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen. We'll start with basics. Let me just share my screen now. So what I've done is, for today's session, our contents are going to be, we'll firstly discuss the basics of these sections. Then there have been certain recent amendments, not only in Finance Act 2020, પણ આપણે જોઈએ તો Finance Act 2016 થી સ્ટાર્ટ કરી અને Finance Act 2019 સુધી પણ સારા એવા amendments આવ્યા છે આ sectionsમાં. So we'll also try and brush up upon those amendments, and then we move on to the issues under both the sections, Section 44AB and then 44AD ADA. as I said, I've tried to capture around 15-16 issues, which will broadly, capture all the interpretational aspects of these sections, and then we'll see what is our role going to be as a tax auditor. જ્યારે આપણે આપણા ક્લાયન્ટ્સને એડવાઇસ આપતા હોઈએ અથવા જ્યારે આપણે ટેક્સ ઓડિટ કરતા હોઈએ, I think that is also going to be very crucial. So with this, I'll start with the basics of this section. Very, very broadly, આપણે અંદર વધારે ડિટેલમાં જશું, પણ very broadly, when we are talking about tax audit, we are looking at section 44AB, which covers businesses as well as professionals. So when you're talking about business, the fellow criteria say that is the turnover has to cross INR 1 crore. However, now there has been a relaxation wherein if you have a turnover of up to 5 crores, you may still not be liable to tax audit if you fulfill certain conditions. એટલે હું એને digital transactions નામ આપું છું, non-cash ની વાત છે, but what I've termed them is digital. Digital does not only mean wallets, but it could also mean banking transactions. So જ્યારે આપણે બિઝનેસની વાત કરીએ છીએ ત્યારે ટર્નઓવર જો 1 કરોડ અથવા 5 કરોડથી વધારે હોય ત્યારે ટેક્સ ઓડિટ લાગે છે. When you are under section 44AE, 44BB and 44BBB. So these are specific sections which are related to presumptive income. એના માટે પણ જો તમે એ જે presumed profits sections માં આપેલા છે એનાથી જો ઓછી આવક તમે દેખાડવાના હો, in that case also tax audit becomes applicable in your case. Section 44AD, which is also going to be a basic fundamental section that we are going to discuss, એમાં સારા એવા amendments આવ્યા છે. અત્યારે માટે આપણે એવું ધ્યાનમાં રાખીએ કે there is a particular subsection 4 of section 44AD. મારા કેસમાં જો એ એપ્લાય થતું હશે અને મારી આવક જે છે ટોટલ આવક એ મેક્સિમમ અમાઉન્ટ નોટ ચાર્જેબલ ટુ ટેક્સ 2.5 લાખ લઈએ આપણે, જો એનાથી વધી જતી હોય તો મને ટેક્સ ઓડિટ લાગે છે. When you are talking about profession, in that case, if my gross receipts crosses 50 lakh, in that case I have to go for a tax audit. Similarly, because there is also a presumptive section, which is section 44ADA, any other point there is a similar provision which says that if my income is lower than the deemed profits under 44ADA, then in that case, if my income is exceeding the maximum amount not chargeable to tax, તો મારે tax audit કરાવવું પડશે. તો આ વસ્તુમાં આ સ્લાઇડમાં આપણે શું જાણવા જેવું છે કે 44AD અને 44ADA આ બે સેક્શન એવી છે જેમાં tax audit ત્યારે લાગશે જ્યારે તમારી આવક maximum amount not chargeable to tax થી વધારે હોય. એટલે even if you do not fulfill the requirements of the profits, deemed profits, but if your income is lesser than maximum amount not chargeable to tax, there is still a scope of being out of the purview of tax audit. What is excluded from the purview of tax audit? So there are two sections, two provisions. There are two provisions in section 44AB. First is જો હું presumptive basis પર 44AD માં small business માટે જે provisions છે એમાં fall થતો હું અને મારી આવક 2 કરોડથી ઓછી હોય. So if I am showing my profits as deemed profits of 6% or 8%, and my turnover is less than 2 crore, I am excluded from the purview of tax audit. Similarly, if the income is of section 44B and BBA, in that case also it is completely excluded from the purview of section 44AB. BBA talks about shipping companies and aircraft companies. 44BB and BBB I am not taking in detail, but broadly speaking, it deals with oil and gas companies and turnkey projects of power. So this is the broad coverage of section 44AB. Then we talk about 44AD and 44ADA. Very interesting. It's a very interesting aspect. So when you are looking at section 44AD, આજથી 5 વર્ષ પહેલા તમે સેક્શન વાંચો અને તમે સેક્શન અત્યારે વાંચો, there is a huge difference. What is the language that is used in the section? Section 44AD talks about eligible assessee. Very important, કારણ કે આગળ જતા આપણને બહુ જ importantly કામમાં લાગશે. So the term that is used in section 44AD is eligible assessee. So when you hear the term eligible assessee, it means it is a benefit which somebody is going to get if you are eligible. So that is the premise. So presumptive taxation, now there are two perspectives. One may say that presumptive taxation is nothing but a mandatory deemed profit which you have to show, and if you are showing it lesser than that, તો તમારે tax audit કરાવવું પડે. But હવે જ્યારે તમે eligible assessee term use કરો છો, that could show that it is actually a beneficial provision and an optional provision for an assessee, only if he is eligible for that. And it is not a mandatory section જેની અંદર તમને થોડા negative repercussions આવી શકે છે. It is not like that. So the two terms that are used are eligible assessee and eligible business. Eligible assessee ખાલી individual, HUF અને partnership firm છે, LLP આમાં covered નથી થતી. Non residents ને 44AD નો benefit નથી મળતો, એ ફક્ત residents ને મળે છે. Very important is if you are claiming any deductions, any profit linked deductions under section 10A, 10AA, 10B, 10BA અથવા ચેપ્ટર 6A માં જે પાર્ટ C છે જે તમને પ્રોફિટ રિલેટેડ ડિડક્શન્સ ની વાત કરે છે, જો તમે એ ક્લેમ કરતા હશો તો તમે એલિજિબલ અસેસી નહીં ગણો ફોર ધ પર્પઝ ઓફ ધીસ સેક્શન. એવી જ રીતે એ લોકો એલિજિબલ બિઝનેસ ની પણ વાત કરે છે. What they are saying is very interesting. There are two criteria for eligible business. One says any business except 44A. એટલે ગુડ્સ કેરેજના જે ધંધો છે એના સિવાયના જે ધંધા હોય that will be covered within the definition of eligible business, but only if the total turnover or gross receipts in the previous year does not exceed INR 2 crore. આપણે એક બહુ જ ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ પોઈન્ટ છે, 2 કરોડની જે લિમિટ છે એ લોકો એલિજિબલ બિઝનેસની ડેફિનેશનમાં લાવ્યા છે, નહીં કે એલિજિબલ અસેસીની. So very important to note that here the limit of INR 2 crores has to be seen co other business. So એલિજિબલ અસેસી થઈ ગયા અને એલિજિબલ બિઝનેસમાં તમારે ફોલ થવું હોય તો તમારે 2 કરોડનો ધંધો મેક્સિમમ તમારો હોવો જોઈએ. What is the deemed profit? It is 8% of turnover or gross receipts or such higher amount as may be claimed by the taxpayer. Again, very important. We generally believe that when we are looking at presumptive taxation, we either talk about 6% or 8% of the profits, which is deemed profits. અને એક broad level understanding એવું છે કે આપણે presumptive taxation માં હઈએ તો books of accounts are not mandatory. In that context, this is going to be an important point because the section does not stop by saying that 8% of turnover or 8% of gross receipts. આપણે જે પહેલા વાત કરી હતી 44BB, 44BBB, 44B અને BBA, આ sectionsમાં there is no comparison between higher amounts or lower amounts. But in section 44AD, there is a provision which says 8% or such higher amount as is claimed by the taxpayer. And that's why as a taxpayer હું ક્યારે પોતાની આવક વધારે દેખાડીશ? મારે જો books of accounts maintain નથી કરવાના તો why would I show amounts at a higher number? That is something that is critical to understand. So broadly 8% or something higher is what will be deemed as your profits. There are certain exclusions. So જેમ કે કોઈ વ્યક્તિ કમિશન earn કરતો હોય, so a person who is earning commission, a person who is into agency business, and a person who is carrying on profession under section 44AA1. So આ ત્રણ વસ્તુ છે જે exclude કરી છે. Again, very interesting. So as I said, what we'll try to do is we'll try to understand the interpretation issues of these sections. Section 44AD only is referring to eligible business. 44AD business ની વાત કરે છે. In that case, why was there a need to specifically mention કે તમે જો profession carry on કરતા હો તો પણ તમે profession 44AA1 માં જો carry કરતા હો તો તમને 44AD નહીં મળે? That is also something that we need to think through. Another very interesting aspect is આ જે ત્રણ exclusions છે, earning income, agency business and carrying on profession. These exclusions are from the definition of eligible assessee. એટલે કોણ eligible assessee નહીં થઈ શકે or કોને આ સેક્શનનો બેનિફિટ નહીં મળે, અને લેંગ્વેજ એવી યુઝ થઈ છે any person who is earning commission, any person who is undertaking business of agency and any person who is carrying on profession under section 44AA1. Blanket exclusion છે. ખાલી તમે આ ધંધો કરતા હો વસ્તુ અલગ છે, પણ જો તમારી પાસે બે ધંધા હોય અને એમાંથી one business is of earning commission and agency business, લેંગ્વેજ જે છે લેંગ્વેજ એવી વાપરવામાં આવી છે કે if a person is engaged in carrying on a profession, if a person is engaged in the agency business તો એને 44AD નો બેનિફિટ નહીં મળે. That is what the language is as of now. Now coming to section 44ADA, આ છે જે નવી સેક્શન છે. It was inserted mainly to benefit the professionals, કારણ કે there was a lot of hue and cry, there were certain case laws જે આપણે આગળ ડિસ્કસ કરશું, and that's why there was a representation whereby now there is a section which categorically deals with professionals. What does it say? અહીંયા eligible assessee term use નથી થઈ. That is something again what we need to keep in mind. Here they have not used the term eligible assessee or eligible business. What they are saying is a resident who is engaged in professions referred to in section 44AA1 and the total gross receipts do not exceed 50 lakh. આ બે conditions જો fulfill થતી હશે તો 44AD લાગુ પડશે, અને 44AD એ લાગુ પડે તો શું થાય? તો તમારા જે ઇન્કમ છે receipts એના 50% will be deemed profits, 50% or higher, similar to 44AD. એટલે you have to compare between your actual income and 50% of your total receipts. Whichever is higher will be deemed to be the profits of your profession. So these were the basics of the two sections. As I said, these are only 2 or 3 sections, but there are a lot of interpretational issues. એટલે હું વધારે ફોકસ એની પર કરીશ. Now we'll look at the recent amendments. Recent amendments ની વાત કરીએ तो सेक्शन 44AB पहला લઈએ. સેક્શન 44AB માં the first and the most important amendment એ શું આવ્યું છે? The first and the most important amendment is that the limit of 1 crore, જે આપણે આગળ પણ જોયું, limit of 1 crore has been enhanced to INR 5 crores. What was the intent? The intent was to encourage non-cash transactions. What are the conditions? The conditions are if aggregate of all amounts received, including amounts received, and in the important છે all amounts received. So we will discuss about the nuances of this particular section, but what I want is that we should keep in mind that the languages aggregate of all amounts received, including amounts received for sales, turnover, or gross receipts during the previous year in cash does not exceed 5% of the said amount. So what they are saying is, તમને કેશમાં જેટલા receipts થયા છે, that should not cross 5% of your total receipts. Similarly, payments માટે પણ છે કે if your cash payments do not exceed 5% of your total payments, then this condition is fulfilled. But both the conditions are to be fulfilled. એવું નથી કે કોઈ પણ એક fulfill કરી દીધી તો તમને benefit મળી જશે 5 કરોડનો. Both the conditions have to be fulfilled. Only then the limit for tax audit gets extended to 5 crores. So this is the first and the most important amendment that is coming. What is the due date for tax audit? So due date for tax audit has now been amended. Earlier it was the same date as for due date of filing return. Now the due date has been changed, whereby with effect from AY 2021, the date has been made to 1 month prior to the due date of furnishing return of income. અને આપણને જેવી રીતે ખ્યાલ છે કે the due date has been extended to 30th November 2020. એટલે in that case, tax audit due date would become 31st of October 2020. So this is another amendment that has come in. The due date has been amended for tax audit. That is also important. One of our issues that we have taken later in the slides will be related to this amendment. Similarly, 44AD. 44AD ની વાત કરીએ તો Amendment Finance Act 2020 માં નથી આવ્યા, but because we are going to discuss certain issues, again it is important કે Finance Act 2016, 17 and 19 ત્રણેયમાં amendments આવ્યા છે in section 44AD. What are those amendments? In Finance Act 2016, they removed the reference to deduction for partners' remuneration and interest. Earlier, if you recall, there was a possible deduction for partners' remuneration and interest in section 44AD, which has been removed. Next is a very critical, very important amendment, which is opt out for a period of 5 years. So person who first opts for 44AD, and that is why it is important, the term that was used was eligible assessee. And that's why when I'm saying is that when a person opts in for 44AD and subsequently he opts out, he is not able to fulfill the requirement of 44AD, then for 5 years he cannot opt in again. So that is a very important amendment that has come in. The next is because the threshold was increased for 44AD to 2 crores, they said that advance tax will become applicable. પણ એમાં પણ એ લોકોએ લીવે એવો આપ્યો છે કે આખા વર્ષનો એડવાન્સ ટેક્સ તમે 15 માર્ચ પહેલા ભરી શકો. સેમ ઇઝ ધ અમેન્ડમેન્ટ ફોર 44ADA. Finance Act 2017 માં what they did was they said કે આપણે નોન કેશ જે ટ્રાન્ઝેક્શન્સ છે એના માટે ડીમ્ડ પ્રોફિટ થોડો ઓછો રાખીએ so that people will undertake more of digital transactions or banking transactions, and that's why the deemed profit rate was reduced to 6% from 8%. Again, what they are saying is આજે 6% ગણવાના છે for financial year 19-20 ની વાત કરીએ તો due date of filing tax return જે છે ત્યાં સુધીમાં જો તમે recover કરી લો by banking channels, if something is outstanding on 31st of March, and if you are able to recover the money before the due date of filing tax return, then in that case 6% would be applicable. They are giving you an extension. એવું નથી કહેતા કે 31 માર્ચ સુધીમાં તમે જો recover કરી દીધા તો they are saying that till the due date of filing tax return, if you are able to recover the money by banking channels, then on that amount the deemed profit would be 6%. Earlier કારણ કે ખાલી accounts pay check, account pay bank draft અને ECS covered હતા Finance Act 2017 માં જે amendment આવ્યું એટલે in order to remove ambiguity, because there are now, if you see in today's world, there are a lot of electronic modes. And that's why Finance Act 2019 also brought in an amendment wherein certain other electronic modes were also covered. For example, credit card, debit card, net banking, Beam Pay, UPI, etc. So these are the amendments in the two sections. So now with this, now we have looked at the amendments for 44AB, 44AD, and 44ADA. With this, we move on to the issues in these respective sections. So first we'll start with 44AB. So when we're talking about 44AB, the first and the foremost, our applicability, we'll go into the numbers, 2 crore, 1 crore, 5 crore, we'll definitely go into that, but that is very, very complex and technically challenging. So what we'll do is we'll start with certain basics and then we'll move on to the complex aspects of this. So કારણ કે એમાં 44AD પણ પિક્ચરમાં આવશે એટલે આપણે 44AB અને 44AD સાથે જોશું when we are comparing the limits and doing a permutation combination. The first and the foremost issue is how do you determine whether a particular assessee is carrying on business or profession? Firstly, why is there a need to determine whether a particular assessee is doing a business or a profession? Two things. First, if you look at the taxability, taxability is broadly governed by the sections after section 28 for either a business or a profession. And most of the sections use the term profits and gains from business or profession. So if you look at it from a taxability perspective, you will not see a much difference. More or less, 30 sections છે જે ખાલી professions માટે છે અથવા ખાલી business માટે છે. For example, depreciation is section જોઈએ. However, when we are looking at the limits for tax audits and all, અને જ્યારે આપણે presumptive taxation ની વાત કરતા હોઈએ ત્યારે it becomes very relevant to determine whether a particular area will be considered or classified as business or whether it will be considered as a profession. And that's why if I say tax audit is first and the foremost reason why somebody should evaluate whether a particular way of working will be considered as a business or whether it will be considered as a profession. What distinguishes a profession from a business? First and the foremost, there are definitions for both the terms given in the act itself. Profession માટે કહે છે કે profession includes vocation. Business માટે કહે છે કે it includes adventure in the nature of trade or commerce or manufacture. And a conversion and a manufacture પછી કહે છે conversion of a non-living object. So that is the first basis on which one should try and identify whether a particular way of working should be called a business or a profession. However, it may not be easy to segregate business from a profession in all fields by going by the definition. So one has to look at the motive behind a particular activity. કે motive શું છે? વધવાનો motive છે? Does one want to grow further? Can that be a motive? Maybe not. કારણ કે profession માં પણ somebody wants to grow. So that may not necessarily mean that a person is carrying on business. Is profit a motive? Maybe yes. Is risk-taking ability, and that's by not being risk-averse, also a factor to determine whether a particular person is carrying out business or not? Again, it could be. This is an area which does not have a clear answer. Let me tell you very clearly. This area does not have a very clear answer, and hence as chartered accountants, we will have to go a foot forward and decide whether in a particular client's case, it should be categorized as business or profession. More than 80-90% of the cases, I think clarity હશે. પણ જે remaining 10-15% વાળા cases છે, એના માટે we'll have to think beyond the obvious. What is the method of functioning of a particular taxpayer? How does he operate? Does he have a laid-back approach? I would not call it a laid-back approach, but what is the method of functioning? Is he doing everything on his own? Does he have a small team? Does he have a large team? What does he want to do with the team that he has? So what is the method of functioning? For example, if I am a chartered accountant, I have a team of chartered accountants. But if there is a person who is not a qualified chartered accountant, but still has a consultancy organization with a lot of chartered accountants working under him, will it be called a profession or will it be called a business? And the fourth point which I have mentioned is very critical: regulatory environment. Can one distinguish a profession on the basis that that particular activity is regulated by a body, by a national body or an international body or a state body? If your activities are governed by a particular body, high chances to say that it is a profession. And if somebody is undertaking activities which is otherwise not governed by a regulatory body, it could fall more or less within the purview of business. These are only certain factors which I have brought in. But as I said, for each case, we'll have to do a proper analysis to determine whether a case falls under business or it falls within the meaning of profession. This question again now brings us to the second issue. And the second issue is, who can carry out profession? Will it be only an individual who carries out profession? Or can it be a partnership firm that can carry out a profession? Can an LLP carry out profession, or a company for that matter? If we stretch it beyond a particular limit, can we say that even a company can carry out profession? Why would this be relevant? And આપણે discuss પણ કરશું. Because in today's world, if you look at the meaning of professions which has been given under section 44AA and the notification, there are a lot of activities which could be done by companies also. Not all the professions are those which may be considered regulated. So that will pose a question on the earlier point, whether something that is not regulated, can it still be considered a profession? And if that be the case, a company can also undertake those activities. In that case, will a company be considered to be undertaking profession? So these are certain questions which are very tricky, and on the basis of facts of each particular case, we will have to see whether in our case it falls within the meaning of business, or it goes beyond and it is considered a business. So here what I've done is I've taken two examples because there are certain judicial precedents available on these areas, which will throw some light on a particular item, whether to be categorized as business or profession. The first one is medical profession. So when we look at medical profession, the first question is, can only qualified doctors undertake medical profession? The first judgment that I've referred is Ranjit Jena. When you ask yourself a question, कि भाई medical profession करवा माटे doctor होવું जरूरी છે કે नहीं? If you cross your heart and ask, the answer would be हाँ, doctor तो होवा જોઈએ, तो જ medical profession કહેવાય. Otherwise, why would it be called a medical profession? Ranjit Jena નો જે કેસ છે, એ કેસમાં he is merely running a nursing home. બરાબર છે? અને એ કેસની અંદર that lady was a doctor and she carried on a nursing home. અને she tried to argue કે મારો કેસ છે એ business છે, and that's why I get a higher limit. અને nursing home માં I had kept multiple people who are working under me, etc. The tribunal said that, ma'am, you are a doctor, you are undertaking the profession of medicine merely because your method of functioning is such, જેની અંદર તમે વધારે લોકો રાખ્યા છે અને તમે વધારે nursing home તરીકે કામ કરો છો, that will not take away the nature of the work. It will still remain a profession. And that's why this judgment could be relevant to draw an inference કે કયા કેસીસમાં profession ગણી શકાય, and whether a change in a particular method of functioning would it lead to a change in the nature of work. એના પછીનો જે કેસ છે નરગોલકર વાળો, રંજના નરગોલકર, આ કેસમાં પુણે આઈટેડ very interesting judgment. In this particular case, what has been held is that that lady, she was herself not a doctor. However, she had hired doctors and was having a nursing home. What is the primary answer that one would have? One would say, okay, she was not a doctor, so more or less આ વસ્તુ businessમાં capture થવી જોઈએ, not in profession. Interestingly, Pune ITED in this particular case said that even if you do not have qualifications, you are neither a doctor nor you have any other qualification in the medical field, still what you are effectively carrying out is a medical profession, because you are providing services which are in the nature of medical services. And that's why even if you are not a doctor, you will still be considered as a profession. So that is something very interesting and something that doesn't really gel well with our thought process, but that is how the judgment was, that a qualification may not be necessary in order to determine whether a particular person is into profession or business. It is what is being done is necessary. That is what is coming out. Whether a company can undertake medical profession. So as I said earlier, a individual and a firm kare to, it's very much understandable. Yes, an individual will generally be a professional जो પોતે services આપતો હોય તો ફર્મમાં પણ કરી શકાય, CA firms પણ હોય છે, LLP માં પણ there are CA firms and other firms which provide professional services. But can a company carry out medical profession? એમાં પહેલો જે જજમેન્ટ લીધો છે એ છે આશાલોક નર્સિંગ હોમ. અગેન મેડિકલ પ્રોફેશનની જ વાત કરી રહ્યા છે. This was a private limited company. એ કેસમાં પણ એવું કહેવામાં આવ્યું છે કે because you are a private limited company, આની અંદર they have gone into the type of entity, they have gone into the type of legal entity. અને એવું કહેવામાં આવ્યું છે કે an artificial person, આ કેસમાં a private limited company, an artificial person cannot be carrying out a profession. So, which again gels with our thought process that generally in case of companies, it would be difficult to say that the company is carrying out a profession. And whether an associate is arguing it from the perspective of business or profession will depend on what is it trying to achieve. Tax audit થી બચવું છે, professional 44ADA માં જવું છે, 44AD માં જવું છે, all these parameters will be very relevant and will have an impact on what is one trying to argue. And that's why one cannot have a one-sided perspective towards these questions. One needs to understand both the perspectives and then take a call in a particular client's case. આ હતું આશાલોકની વાત. એના પછીના જે બે જજમેન્ટ્સ છે એ કેસીસમાં એવું કહેવામાં આવ્યું છે. However, firstly હું તમને એક ક્લેરિટી આપી દઉં કે જે પછીના બે જજમેન્ટ્સ છે વિપુલ મેડકોપ અને ડેડિકેટેડ હેલ્થકેર સર્વિસીસ, આ બે જે જજમેન્ટ્સ છે they are not directly in the context of section 44AB. આ બે જજમેન્ટ્સ જે આવ્યા છે એ સેક્શન 194J ના કોન્ટેક્સ્ટમાં આવ્યા છે. And that's why it is very interesting. કારણ કે એના પછીનો જે પોઈન્ટ આપણે લેશું એ આપણે 194J ના કોન્ટેક્સ્ટથી પણ ઇવેલ્યુએટ કરવો પડશે. આ બે જજમેન્ટ્સમાં એવું કહેવામાં આવ્યું છે કે સેક્શન 44AB 194J એનું એક્સપ્લેનેશન read with 44AB or 44AA does not clearly demarcate that any person being an individual or a firm providing professional services. It says any person. Sections 44AA and AB, they talk about any person. They do not talk about specific category of person. And a person is a definition in Income Tax Act માં આપી છે, એમાં બધા જ કવર થાય છે. Individual ko, ke firm ko, or an LLP or a company. And that's why in this Vipul Medcop વાળું જે judgment છે, that is a Delhi High Court judgment. Delhi High Court એ એવું હોલ્ડ કર્યું છે કે even a company could be providing medical professional services or professional services, I may put it that way. કારણ કે professional services ની આપણે જો definition જોવા જઈએ 194J માં, one can try to argue that 194J is in a different context, 44AA and 44AB are in a different context. However, professional services ની definition છે 194J માં, it says services provided by a person carrying on profession provided in section 44AA. એટલે મારા હિસાબે there is not much of a difference. Rather, there is no difference in this perspective when you are deciding whether a particular person is carrying on profession or a person is carrying on business. And that's why these two judgments could be relevant. જે એવું કહે છે કે કંપનીના કેસમાં પણ professional services થઈ શકે. If we are to take that logic, coming to the next point, IT consultancy services, accounting and tax services and engineering services. Why have I taken IT consultancy services? કારણ કે section 44AA નું જે notified services છે એની અંદર information technology has been covered as a service, as a profession. Now, information technology is of wide import. Information technology કંઈ પણ થઈ શકે છે. આજના જમાનામાં જ્યારે આપણે બધું જ ડિજિટલ કરી રહ્યા છીએ ત્યારે તો information technology ના ગાર્ભમાં there could be multiple things which could be done. So એ કેસમાં શું બધી જ વસ્તુ બિઝનેસ ગણાશે? શું બધી જ વસ્તુ પ્રોફેશન ગણાશે? કારણ કે પ્રોફેશનલના ડેફિનેશનમાં IT information technology is covered. So can I say that a private company which is providing BPO services is engaged in a profession? The apparent answer is no, but then there is no exclusion to this. And that's why it becomes important to take a conscious call that information technology services whether a qualification is a must, whether it is regulated by a body. એક વસ્તુ બહુ ઇન્ટરેસ્ટિંગ છે જે મેં અહીંયા કેપ્ચર નથી કરી. જ્યારે આપણે ક્રોસ બોર્ડર ટ્રાન્ઝેક્શનની વાત કરતા હોઈએ, ક્રોસ બોર્ડર ટ્રાન્ઝેક્શનના પર્સપેક્ટિવથી આઈ વુડ લાઈક ટુ બ્રિંગ આઉટ એન ઓબ્ઝર્વેશન કે જ્યારે પણ ડબલ ટેક્સેશન અવોઇડન્સ અગ્રીમેન્ટની વાત થાય ક્રોસ બોર્ડર ટ્રાન્ઝેક્શનના કેસમાં, ત્યારે there is something called independent personal services, IPS, which is similar to professional services. એવું આપણે અત્યારે સમજીએ. There is a concept of independent personal services. એ કોન્ટેક્સ્ટમાં OECD એ એવું રેકમેન્ડ કર્યું છે કે independent personal servicesમાં either an individual or a professional firm, only those two are covered and corporates are not covered. Term પણ એવું છે independent personal services, but it is a comparative to professional services under the domestic law જે આપણું Income Tax Act છે એમાં. And that's why if one was to infer a meaning from the definition of independent personal services, જેમાં firm covered છે, while the heading says independent personal, but a firm is also covered because they understand that a firm is a collection of individuals. And that's why Even a firm can provide independent personal services. A context માં આપણે જોવા જઈએ, in that case one can argue that a company cannot provide professional services. Why is it relevant in this context? એવી જ રીતે હું અત્યારે પહેલા એક્ઝામ્પલ લઈએ, accounting and tax services ની વાત કરીએ. We see a lot of private companies now જે ખાલી tax services આપતી હોય, જે attestation functions નથી કરતી. એમાં પણ CAs ચાલુ કરી હોય છે એ companies and they are functioning. So the whole team is full of chartered accountants. The heads are chartered accountants, but it is not a firm, it is a private company and only providing tax services. હવે tax services જો હું આપતો હોઉં, please note that technical consultancy is also covered under profession. જો હું લોકોને technical inputs આપતો હોઉં in the form of a private limited company, will it be considered as a profession or will it be considered as a firm? જો આપણે એવું લોજિક લઈએ કે કંપનીને ક્યારે પણ પ્રોફેશનમાં ફોલ કરી ના શકાય, in that case જો એ સેમ વસ્તુ I am saying non audit services જો હું એક પાર્ટનરશિપ ફર્મમાં આપતો હોઉં, whether it will be considered as a profession merely because I am working out of a partnership firm. આ બે વસ્તુ જો કમ્પેર કરીએ, the same set of services, tax advisory services, tax compliance services જેમાં attestation નથી જોઈતું, one is a private company, one is a partnership firm, whether this will be considered as a profession. હવે જો એ પાર્ટનરશિપ ફર્મને CA ગાઈડ કરતી હોય, then one may say that it becomes a profession and not otherwise it remains a business. And if that is the logic, then a partnership firm cannot be registered with the institute under the Chartered Accountants Act. And then one can take a view that it would be considered a business and not a profession. એવી જ રીતે IT માં પણ આપણે સમજવું પડશે. Unfortunate part is for IT there is no governing body. There may be associations, but there is no prima facie governing body which governs those services. And that's why it becomes critical. As a payer, મારે safe રહેવું હોય તો હું 10% tax કાપીશ 194J માં, by saying that it is a professional services, but the recipient would say, I am not a professional, I am a company, I am doing business. હું તો બિઝનેસમાં છું, મારું ટેકનિકલ સર્વિસીસ છે, 2% લેખે કપાવી જોઈએ. And that's why there is this overlap between technical services and professional services. એટલે આજ question 44AB માટે પણ equally relevant થશે. And that's why I have tried to bring it out here. So this slide was relevant. So that was the first issue that I wanted to bring to your notice, કે business or profession માં આપણે કેવી રીતે distinguish કરી શકીએ. અને at least the idea is કે આજે આપણે થોડી direction મળે કે કયા thought process થી આગળ વિચારવાનું છે. We may not get answers to all questions, but at least we'll have a thought process that what is the direction in which we need to look forward. Then we move to the another issue, which is multiple activities. એક જ assessee multiple activities carry out કરતો હોય, એ કેસમાં 44AB કેવી રીતે apply થાય, whether turnover is to be clubbed or it should not be clubbed to determine the applicability. Broadly હું તમને કહી દઉં તો 44AD આવ્યા પછી this question will not have much relevance, કારણ કે 44AD આવ્યા પછી most of them would go for 44AD જેમાં exclusion આપ્યું છે tax audit માં. However, it is important to note કારણ કે એવા કેસીસ પણ હોઈ શકે છે જે 44AD માં ફોલ થતા પણ હોય અને બીજા બિઝનેસીસ કદાચ ના થતા હોય. So it is always necessary, before we plunge into the interpretations, it is very necessary to understand કે section 44AB અને section 213 આ બે definitions ખાસી relevant છે to determine whether a particular item is to be captured or not. And age context ma, it is relevant to note that 44AB says that where any person carrying on business, if the limits from the business exceeds a particular limit, tax audit applicable થઈ જાય છે. If I read the language, it says every person carrying on business shall, if his total sales, turnover or gross receipts, as the case may be in business, exceeds 1 crore rupees. પછી લખે છે that person should get his accounts of such previous year audited by an accountant, blah blah blah. એટલે relevance શું છે? તો relevance છે every person carrying on business shall, if his total sales or turnover from business. અહીંયા એવું બંનેમાંથી કોઈ પણ ટાઈપનું ડિસ્ટિંક્શન નથી કે whether business is to be seen, whether this particular limits are to be seen co-op business or whether they are to be seen as an assessee. કર્ણાટકા હાઈકોર્ટે સતીશ શેટ્ટી ના કેસમાં in the context of penalty proceedings na context માં એવું હોલ્ડ કર્યું છે કે there are two interpretations which are possible. because there is no clarity in 44AB, one can possibly interpret in a manner that એમાં consolidate કરવાની વાત નથી કરી રહ્યા, and that's why each business has to be looked at separately. However, એ લોકોએ જ્યારે પેનલ્ટી નથી લગાડી ત્યારે પેનલ્ટી નહીં લગાડવા પાછળનું રીઝન આપ્યું છે કે under a bona fide belief that person was not aware of the law, and that's why we are not levying penalty. એટલે finally ultimately જો તમે કર્ણાટકા હાઈકોર્ટનું જજમેન્ટ જુઓ તો they are tilting towards the view that you have to look at it on a consolidated basis. અને એ જ વસ્તુ આપણા ICAI guidance noteમાં in para 5.19 they have very clearly mentioned that when there are multiple businesses, the turnover has to be clubbed. Now, as I said, the current situation. What happens if the businesses are 44AD businesses and I am claiming 44AD? In that case, I think the guidance note is also very clear that the turnover from 44AD business has to be excluded. And a pachi jo turnover ni limit cross thati hoy 44AB na je parameters છે એની અંદર, in that case that person needs to undertake tax audit for that business, otherwise not. Similar interesting issue that would come up is જ્યારે એક જ વ્યક્તિ બિઝનેસ પણ કરતું હોય અને પ્રોફેશન પણ હોય. ફોર એક્ઝામ્પલ આગળના સેશનમાં આપણે સાંભળ્યું કે a doctor could have a pharmacy shop, a lawyer could have a shop for selling legal books. તો એ કેસમાં શું થાય? ICAI ની ગાઈડન્સ નોટ એવું કહે છે કે when there is a business and there is a profession, each item will have to be compared. So તમે પહેલા બિઝનેસમાં ચેક કરો, બિઝનેસમાં તમારું ટર્નઓવર 1 કરોડ ક્રોસ કરે છે કે નહીં. If the turnover is not crossing, check if in your profession you are crossing the limit of 50 lakh. બંનેમાંથી કોઈ પણ એક વસ્તુ જો ફૂલફિલ થઈ જતી હોય એ કેસમાં તમારે ઓવરઓલ બુક્સના ઓડિટ કરાવવા પડે. That is what the guidance note says. And appears logical also. What if there is a 44AD business and a 44AA profession? And here comes the interesting part. કારણ કે મેં જે પહેલા વાત કરી હતી કે 44AD માં there is an exclusion. An exclusion is for persons who are engaged in a particular business. So now I will again read through 44AD na exclusions ની જો વાત કરું, subsection 6 ની વાત કરું 44AD ના. It says the provisions of this section, notwithstanding anything contained in the foregoing provisions, shall not apply to a person carrying on profession as referred to in 44AA1. So now let us spend a couple of minutes here. What does the section say? The section says that the provisions of section 44AD shall not apply to a person who carries out profession as specified in 44AA1. That means, and that is why my earlier question, okay, why is it placed in 44AD? Why is this exclusion placed in 44AD? If it is a profession, it is logical that profession is not business. So પછી 44AD માં મૂકવાનું reason શું? One possible reason is if a person is carrying out a profession which is mentioned in 44AA, એ કેસમાં એ વ્યક્તિ બીજા ધંધા માટે 44AD ના લઈ શકે. That is the interpretation that is coming out from this section 44AD subsection 6. That's why it was very interesting. It refers to every person carrying on business. આવી જ રીતે normal business હોય અને 44AD એનો profession હોય, તો જેમ આપણે ઉપર જોયું એવી રીતે 44ADA ની ટર્નઓવર એક્સક્લુડ કરવામાં આવશે. અને આમ પણ તમે કારણ કે પ્રોફેશનની વાત કરો છો તો એ અલગ જ જોવાનું છે પહેલા. અને રિસીટ્સ બિઝનેસમાંથી તમારી રિસીટ્સ જો ક્રોસ થતી હોય તો તમને 44AB અપ્લાય થાય છે. So that is the broad understanding when you are looking at multiple activities. These are only some examples. I am again saying it's a sea, it's an ocean of interpretations. There could be multiple situations. And I'll try to, if there are certain questions and I see there are certain questions coming in, I'll try to take up certain questions towards the end. Otherwise, what I would recommend, કારણ કે એમાં સારા એવા interpretations પણ જોઈશે. I will share my email address also, and the questions can be shooted to my email address, and I'll try to respond to them by undertaking a proper analysis. We'll try to take up certain questions towards the end of the session, no doubt about it. So that was the another topic. Now moving forward. What if the income is not chargeable to tax or is exempt? So અત્યાર સુધી આપણે શું જોયું કે ટર્નઓવરની લિમિટ્સ ચેક કરી બિઝનેસ ઓર પ્રોફેશન છે કે નહીં. Now what happens if somebody's income is not chargeable to tax? Gross receipts હશે, but what if the income is not chargeable to tax effectively? So there are two parameters on this slide. One is income not being chargeable to tax. Second is income exempt from tax. જ્યારે મેં સ્ટાર્ટિંગમાં ડિસ્કસ કર્યું હતું ત્યારે કવરેજમાં મેં આ વસ્તુ પોઈન્ટ આઉટ કરી હતી કે 44AD અને 44AD એવી સેક્શન્સ છે જેના કોન્ટેક્સ્ટમાં સેક્શન 44AB clearly says in 44AB clause D and 44AB clause E that if the limits are not breached, then no tax audit is required. So maximum amount not chargeable to tax નો જે બેનિફિટ છે એ ખાલી 44AD અને 44AD માં જે અસેસીસ ક્લેમ કરી રહ્યા છે એમના માટે જ બેનિફિટ છે. અધરવાઇઝ there is no specific mention કે તમારી maximum amount chargeable to tax થી ઓછી હોય તો તમારે tax audit નહીં કરાવવાનું. There is no mention about it. However, so what will happen in other cases? Guidance note છે ઇન્સ્ટિટ્યૂટની એ પેરા 6.2 માં એવું બહુ ક્લિયરલી કહે છે કે even if your maximum income is below the maximum amount which is not chargeable to tax તો પણ tax audit કરાવવું પડે છે in the cases which are not covered above. So that is again important. If my income is not chargeable to tax, I mean when the income is lesser than the maximum amount, એટલે 2.5 લાખથી ઓછી હોય મારી આવક તો પણ મારે tax audit કરાવવું પડે if I am fulfilling the criteria of the turnover. Similarly, now we look at the second aspect. The second aspect is about exempt income. If broadly speaking, if someone was to see, આપણે એકવાર એવું વાત કરીએ છે કે when we are talking about incomes below the maximum amount not chargeable to tax, ત્યારે we are taking a call કે generally તમારે tax audit કરાવવું પડે. So why should it make a difference જ્યારે income exempt હોય? Should it make a difference? It should not, right? એ કેસમાં પણ મારે tax audit કરાવવું જ પડે logically. However, there is an ITET decision by Mumbai ITET, India Magnum Fund ના કેસમાં આ જજમેન્ટ છે જેમાં એવું કહેવામાં આવ્યું છે કે જો તમારી income exempt જ હોય તો tax audit કરાવવાનો સવાલ નથી. That is what the judgment says. However, guidance note says, and I would put it this way that rightly so, even if one has an exempt income, whether એટલે જ્યારે objective શું છે tax audit નો objective એ છે કે તમે જે બધું claim કરી રહ્યા છો if that is proper or not. One may definitely argue that the primary objective of tax audit is to check on the expenses that are claimed, and if the ultimate income is exempt from tax, then it doesn't really matter if I have claimed proper expenses or not. Whatever is my income, it's going to be exempt. Then why should I do tax audit? That is one possible argument that one can take, and that is why ITET decision છે જેમાં argument factor કરવામાં આવ્યો છે. However, one should also look at it. હવે જ્યારે tax auditor ની વાત કરીએ છે ત્યારે exempt income ના context માં પણ જોવાનું છે કે tax auditor ની responsibility કેટલી છે. And that is why I would believe that one should have a tax audit done even if the income is exempt from tax. This is again another ocean. Speculative transactions. I think more or less away clarity છે because of the guidance note, but just wanted to bring to your notice that guidance note says, and I've made the reference here, guidance note says that દરેક transaction ના positive and negative differences હોય એનું summation કરવાનું છે absolute terms માં, and if you are crossing that limit, that is to be taken into consideration for determination of turnover. There are certain judgments and very interesting, and that's why I have brought this issue here, though it is a very known topic for all of us. એટલે બે ત્રણ judgments છે, મુંબઈ આઈટેટ ના છે, પુણે આઈટેટ ના છે અને ચેન્નઈ ના છે. So interesting judgments are Gromor, Banwari અને અંજુ હલ્દિયા. અંજુ હલ્દિયા જયપુર આઈટેટ, એટલે I've taken it in sequence. Gromor was the first one, પછી અનાહિતા છે, બનવારી છે, અંજુ હલ્દિયા છે અને જૂડ એન્જેલો મેનેડેસ છે. એ કેસીસમાં so there are 3 judgments wherein it has been held. આ બધા judgments મોટે ભાગે કેવા હોય છે પેનલ્ટીના કોન્ટેક્સ્ટમાં પણ હોય છે, but what has been held is that there is no turnover. That is what has been held, that there is no turnover. So even if the guidance note says that aggregate of positive and negative differences are to be considered, can one still rely upon the judgments and say that in case of speculative transactions there cannot be a turnover whatsoever? Whatever is there is speculative profits or losses. One cannot have a turnover. That is what has been held in these 3 judgments. એટલે કાલે ઉઠીને argument લેવી હોય, it is still a possibility. However, because we are also bound by our institute and we have to respect and follow the guidance note also, and that's why more or less now it's settled that aggregate of positive and negative differences જે હોય એ તમારે factor કરવાના છે જ્યારે તમે turnover ની વાત કરો છો for the purpose of tax audit. Last judgment છે Jude Angelo Meneges. A case ની અંદર ચેન્નઈ આઈટેટે, because see if you look at it, the earlier judgments were prior to 2014 જ્યારે guidance note updated નહોતી, and now guidance note came in 2014, and then after that there is this judgment which was delivered by the Chennai bench of ITET in 2018, wherein they have considered the guidance note and they have said that aggregate of positive and negative differences are to be considered for determining turnover. So that was for speculative transactions. Moving on. Now we are looking at applicability to foreign companies or individuals. 44 foreign companies ની જ્યારે આપણે વાત કરીએ and I'm sure some of you must be having clients which are foreign companies. અને તમારા clients નહીં હોય તો તમારા clients એવા હશે જે foreign companies અથવા foreign individuals ને pay out કરતા હશે services માટે. And that's why this becomes critical. So foreign companies ની જ્યારે આપણે taxability ની વાત કરતા હોઈએ છે, the example that I've taken here is for royalty and fees for technical services. So what's the question? The question is royalty and fees for technical services received by a foreign company, should it be governed by tax audit? For that, we need to understand the basic provisions of the Act which deal with taxability of royalty and fees for technical services. There are two sections, 44DA and section 115 capital A. 44DA talks about a situation જેની અંદર foreign company permanent establishment India માં છે. And correspondingly 115 capital E ની જો વાત કરીએ તો જ્યારે permanent establishment India માં નથી એ કેસની વાત કરે છે. So there are these two provisions. Permanent establishment India માં હોય ત્યારે તમારે એમની આવક net basis પર ગણવાની છે. One has to compute it on a net basis. However, if the income falls under 115 capital A, wherein there is no PE of the foreign company in India, in that case, the income is to be taxed on a gross basis. So એમાં તમે ખર્ચા બાદ નથી લેતા. You claim the income on a gross basis. So the question is, now in both these scenarios, whether tax audit applies. પહેલા આપણે PE વાળી વાત કરીએ, permanent establishment વાળા કેસ. એ કેસમાં બહુ ક્લિયર છે કે the income is taxable under the head profits and gains from business or profession. Because it is believed that because you have a permanent establishment, that is a business that you are carrying out in India. However, section 44AA and 44AP માં specific exclusion નથી. Section 44AA માં whether there not being a specific exclusion, should it still be possible to say કે મારે books of accounts maintain નથી કરવા? જ્યારે મારી permanent establishment હોય ત્યારે 44AA માં fall થઈ જાય છે because there is no specific exclusion. When we are talking about separate audit and audit report, another point is when a foreign company has a PE in India, they already have to provide a separate audit report in form 3CE. Does that mean કે મારે 44AB માં tax audit નથી કરાવવાનો? The possible view is that even if you have to provide a report in form 3CE, which is specific to those services, 44AB માં તો audit કરાવવું જ પડશે. Because you are claiming certain expenses for which you need to allow the auditor to verify the claim. And that's why tax audit would become possible, would become applicable. Correspondingly, when I am now referring to 115 capital A, હું જ્યારે gross basis ની વાત કરું છું, very interesting, whether the same income, because I don't have a permanent establishment in India, will it not attract 44AA, 44AB? The first question is whether it continues to remain a business receipt. The logical answer or the first answer that comes to our mind is, of course, yes. પહેલા પણ મને royalty and fees for technical services મળતા હતા જે હું profits and gains from business or profession માં tax કરતો હતો. And even in this case, the transaction remains the same. The only difference is India માં permanent establishment નથી. The method of providing services could be the same except for the India leg. Does that make a difference to the characterization of that income? આ કેસમાં એવું છે કે income tax return, when we file the tax return, this does not go under profits and gains from business or profession. And it is the second point to add to it is because it is something which is not covered in 44DA, it goes out of the purview of profits and gains from business or profession. And that's why that is the first argument કે જ્યારે પણ મારું 115 capital A માં fall થતું હોય ત્યારે મારે tax audit કરાવવાની જરૂર નથી કારણ કે as we know 44AB applies when I am doing a business or a profession. Can I call it a profession? As I said, technical services, again that glitch, whether a technical service will be a profession. But more or less, if it is on a gross basis, the other argument that one can have is gross basis માં જે આપણે presumptive માટે argument લઈએ છે. Why is presumptive basis out of the purview of tax audit? કારણ કે gross basis, it deems a particular income as your income. Similarly, જ્યારે gross basis પર આવક થતી હોય અને તમને ખર્ચા બાદ મળવાના જ નથી ત્યારે એ કેસમાં tax audit કરાવવાનો મતલબ નથી. because that is the whole intent. 1984 નો આપણે જો મેમોરેન્ડમ જોઈએ, it very clearly says that the overall objective of tax audit is to verify the claim of expenses that have been incurred by the taxpayer. And if you look at that intent, then there should not be a requirement to maintain books of accounts or get tax audit done. Here, one may also refer to Delhi High Court judgment in the case of Snam Projective SPA. જે કેસમાં એવું કહેવામાં આવ્યું છે, in the case of a foreign company on a gross basis, wherein it has been held that if the income of royalty or FTS is under 115 capital A on a gross basis, then in that case, tax audit does not apply. So, જે લોકોને clients foreign companies અથવા individuals હોય, અથવા જેમના Indian clients એવા હોય, જે લોકો આ લોકોને pay કરતા હોય, because it is a good thing to let your clients know that their counterparts should also undertake this exercise. Again, this is also very interesting. Whether 44AB applies to partners of a firm. Relevant for a lot of us. See, here the question is the remuneration and the interest that a partner gets in a firm, whether that is his business income or not, or whether he is carrying on a business or a profession. અત્યારે આપણે 44AB ના કોન્ટેક્સ્ટમાં જોઈએ છે. So then let us evaluate whether the remuneration and interest that a partner gets from a firm, whether it would be counted as a gross receipt of that partner for profession or business. Depends on the type of partnership firm. એટલે CA firm હોય તો આપણે profession ની વાત કરીએ, અને say a partnership firm is carrying on a business, તો એ કેસમાં આપણે business ની વાત કરીએ. Whether it will be considered as gross receipts from the business or not. And that's why we need to spend some time on the basis of it, the basics of taxability. So partnership firm આપણને ખબર છે કે it's one and the same, the partners in the partnership firm, and that's why there are certain provisions જેમ કે pass through ને બધું છે. And that's why one can try and say that a partnership firm is carrying out business. It is only a segregation of taxability. It is the overall income of the firm which is being taxed. A portion of it is being taxed in the hands of the partner. કારણ કે can a partner be an employee of a firm? Partnership Act વાંચીએ તો there are different interpretations. Can a partner be an employee and draw remuneration? There is a question mark on that as per the Partnership Act. And that's why it becomes relevant કે જે મળે છે that is actually a share of the profits, but you draw it as a remuneration. So then can it be considered that the person who is working as a partner is actually carrying on a business or a profession? See, apparently, if you try to look at it, section 28 ma partner ની જે remuneration છે tax થાય છે as profits or gains from business or profession. In this context, there are certain judgments. Coincidentally, all the judgments are of partners of the same firm. The three judgments that I have mentioned in black, they are by the Kolkata bench of ITAT, and in a very short span of time. So what have they held is that the taxpayer argued that it is not me who is carrying out the profession. It is not me. It is the firm who is carrying out the profession. I am just a representative in that firm. And the method of showing income in PGBP, એ ખાલી એક nomenclature છે. It is just a method of taxing my income. That doesn't mean કે હું business કરું છું. હું મારા પોતાની જાતે business નથી કરી રહ્યો. હું મારા પોતાની જાતે profession નથી કરી રહ્યો. It is the firm who is doing that profession. So મને tax audit apply ના થવું જોઈએ. That is what these partners had claimed. All the judgments are in the context of penalty. However, the judgments have held that even if you are a partner of a firm, it is because you are a chartered accountant in profession. Because you are a chartered accountant in profession અને તમારી પાસે COP છે, એટલે જ firm તમારી services લઈ રહી છે to provide services to the clients. And that's why you are carrying out a profession in your own name. That is what the judgments say, and that is the principle which has been upheld. We need to remember this કારણ કે આગળ કામ આવશે. So all the three judgments had relied upon Kolkata High Court judgment in the case of Amal Ganguly, જેમાં પણ એ લાઇન્સ પર જ હોલ્ડ કરવામાં આવ્યું હતું. So this is for firms and chartered accountants. What about other cases જે normal businesses હોય? તો એ લોકોના કેસમાં પણ શું tax audit આવી જશે દરેક પાર્ટનરના હાથમાં if the remuneration and interest is high? Going by this interpretation, yes. Now if you look at the amendments, જે આપણે વાત કરી, the amendments are twofold. One is talking about receipts, the other one is talking about payments, and they are referring to all amounts received and all payments made. So the first question is whether the amounts received or payments made are to be looked at co business or co the taxpayer. Again, both interpretation issues, and that's why I've taken up this issue, whether this aggregate of all amounts received and aggregates of all payments made are to be seen for the assessee as a whole or for the particular business. Language provided that in case of a person whose aggregate of all amounts received, including amounts received on sales, turnover or gross receipts during the previous year in cash, does not exceed 5% of the said amount. So here the reference is to a particular person, the reference is not to a business. And therefore, when you are looking at all amounts received and all amounts paid, whether you have breached that limit of 5% for receipts and payments or not, in that case, what you need to see is the total receipts and payments. અને આગળ જે આપણે બિઝનેસ વાઇઝ સેગ્રીગેશનની વાત કરી એ કોન્ટેક્સ્ટમાં this will be very relevant કારણ કે તમારે ઓવરઓલ અસેસીનું જોવાનું છે. If you fulfill those, then again you refer to the business part of it. But that is what it is written, that it is a person specific and not business specific. How do you determine cash receipts and cash payments? ઉપર જ્યારે મેં વાત કરી છે ત્યારે મેં all amounts ની વાત કરી છે. Now we are looking at cash receipts. Again, as I read, the denominator and the numerator both have the same context, and that's why they'll have to be read in the same context. That is specific to a taxpayer and not specific to a particular business. Very interesting point is that અહીંયા જે language use કરી છે આપણે અત્યાર સુધી જે જોયું છે within the law, the language that has been used is amounts received or paid other than by way of account pay check or account pay bank draft. અહીંયા જે language use થઈ છે that is amounts received in cash. તમારે જે ટકાવારી ગણવાની છે that is in respect of the cash receipts divided by the total receipts, cash payments divided by the total payments, and that's why only cash transactions are to be considered, pure cash. That is something that we need to understand. The language is different from 40A3 and 44AD. 44AD આપણે પાછળથી આવશું. The next question is, જ્યારે આપણે all amounts received and all amounts paid made ની વાત કરીએ છે, just reminding this is in context of the amendment which has come in this year. Okay, if your cash transactions are less than 5%, then your turnover goes up to 5 crores to determine whether your tax audit is applicable or not. A context ma, how do you determine all receipts, all amounts received and all payments made? ખાલી revenue લેવાના કે capital પણ લેવાના? Capital જો લેવાના હોય તો loans, share capital એ બધાનું શું? There is no clarity in the law. But what the government has now started doing is, જે પણ વસ્તુ law માં clear ના હોય એ કાં તો તમે tax audit report માં એ લોકો નોટ આપી દે છે અથવા income tax return માં એ લોકો નોટ આપી દે છે, which could expand the meaning of the law. Not in this context, but generally what we have seen is over the last 3-4 years, the government has been expanding the flow of the income tax return format અને એની અંદર જ અમુક notes આપી દે છે, which in fact signify કે government નો thought process આ છે, government નો view આ છે. So what has happened is આ વખતનું જો income tax return આપણે જોઈએ તો income tax return માં ફોર્મેટમાં એવું કહેવામાં આવે છે કે they are saying that are you liable to maintain accounts as per 44A, પછી કહે છે કે whether you are going under presumptive basis, and then they say if no, whether during the year total this exceeds 1 crore but does not exceed 5 crore, and then they refer to all amounts received A2 ma and A2 3 ma they are referring to all payments made, and here they are saying that capital account ના જે transactions છે જેમ કે capital contribution, loans etc, એ બધી વસ્તુ પણ factor થશે. And that's why while the primary thought process is કે business ના ખર્ચા અને business ની receipts જોવાની છે, not ખર્ચા necessarily but payments, but here what they are saying is not only the revenue transactions but also the capital transactions are to be taken into consideration. And in this context I would put it rightly, this is rightly done, because the idea is કે non cash transactions ને વધારે વેગ મળે અને cash transactions જેટલા બને એટલા ઓછા થઈ શકે. એટલે જો ખાલી revenue transactions જ factor કરે તો that objective is not getting achieved. In order to achieve that objective, what they have done is they have said that all capital account transactions will also be factored in this. Now what has happened is જે આપણે જોયું કે due date amend થઈ છે. So what has happened is the due date has been postponed. What could be the issue? Now tax return ની due date postponed થઈ, tax audit ની due date prepone થઈ છે. So there will be a time gap. There will be a 1 month time gap. So what happens as a tax auditor? what should I be doing? There are certain positions, for example, a case law, which may come to the notice of the taxpayer at a later point in time after the tax audit. Now, what will happen is there are certain positions that you have to finalize by the tax audit due date. However, the tax return will go later. And if the taxpayer changes the position, then there will be a mismatch between the tax audit report and the tax return. Two common areas that will have impact is 43B and 40A1 and 40A1A. 43B, I think it's very common, and all of us have come across such issues. એટલે આપણે અત્યારે પણ જોઈએ છે કે આપણે કઈ છેલ્લા દિવસે 43B ના કેલ્ક્યુલેશન્સ નથી કરતા. We take a cutoff date and we mention in our tax audit report कि as on this date, this is the amount which is not paid. અને એનો ક્લેમ પાછળથી પછી બીજા વર્ષે લેવામાં આવે છે. In quite a few cases. Technically, if one was to see, જો 43B નો ક્લેમ પાછળથી લેવામાં આવે, can a tax officer say in the second year, if section 43B શું કહે છે? Section 43B, and I'm discussing this particular aspect while I'm not talking of 3CD, but 43B એટલે લઉં છું કારણ કે આ ઇશ્યુ ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ છે અને ખાસા બધા આપણા ક્લાયન્ટ્સમાં આવશે પણ ખરું. અને forget the amendment, even without the amendment that was an issue. For example, 43B says કે તમારા જે ખર્ચા થયા છે એ તમને પેમેન્ટ બેસિસ પર મળશે. તમે રિટર્ન પહેલા જો રિટર્ન ભરતા પહેલા એ ખર્ચા if you are able to pay those expenses. What happens is the section very clearly says that if you paid before that return due date, you get an expenditure. And what if I have paid it before the due date of return, but I have not claimed it? જેવું થઈ શકે છે હવે. તમે tax audit પહેલા બતાવી દો અને tax return માં, for example, somebody continues to follow the tax audit and does not claim that expenditure that is paid in that 1 month period. આપણે નવેમ્બરની વાત લઈએ, આ વખતે નવેમ્બરમાં દિવાળી છે અને દિવાળીમાં there will be bonus payouts. Say for example 31st October tax audit પતી ગયું અને bonus payouts પાછળથી થયા છે. Now there will be a mismatch between the two. A કેસીસમાં ITR માં there will be a mismatch when you એ જે મેં અત્યારે લખ્યું છે કે tax audit versus ITR, there will be a mismatch there also. So 143(1) માં mismatch દેખાશે અને એના લીધે demand raise થશે. I think this is a very practical point which all of us have to factor, that tax audit and ITR has to be reconciled. ઘણા લોકો practically એવું કરે છે કે જે tax audit માં what the government has started to do is tax audit માંથી fetch કરે છે 143(1) ના processing માટે. And that's why if you are mentioning something on 43B in tax audit, practically what certain chartered accountants are doing is that when they do the tax return માં પણ only they will show only specific amount in 43B which has been shown in the tax audit, and the remaining amount છે એ any other allowances તરીકે લઈ લે છે, so that there is no mismatch. Whether it is technically correct or not, am I showing inaccurate particulars? Maybe no. કાલે ઉઠીને assessing officer question કરે, in that case I'll have to justify that because of this procedural mismatch by the authorities, I had to show it somewhere else and not in 43B. Otherwise my amounts match not have tax audit reports are. So that is the practical approach that quite a few chartered accountants are taking. And this is important because going forward mapping થવાનું છે tax audit report and ITR માં there is going to be pre-filled ITRs, and that's why it is important. I'd like to spend 3-4 minutes on this slide and then we'll rush to 44AD. As a tax auditor, what is our eligibility? And this is something which is 2015 માં amendment આવી ગયું છે, but I thought I'll take it up because a lot of us may certainly not recollect about this amendment. અને ખાસી વાર એવું પણ થઈ શકે કે miss out થઈ જાય knowingly unknowingly, and that's why it becomes very important for us to know whether we are actually eligible to undertake tax audit for a particular client. અને એટલે જ આ non technical aspect છે, એટલે તે છતાંય I have considered it here. I did not want to go into the procedural aspects of it, but this is relevant for all the practicing chartered accountants out here. એટલે આ ખાસું relevant થશે. જે amendment આવ્યું હતું એવું હતું કે જે who can do a tax audit, એટલે section 44AB માં reference જે આપ્યો છે, that is a reference which is to section 288 subsection 2. અને 288 subsection 2 નો જે explanation છે, that talks about chartered accountant defined under the Chartered Accountant Act. અને there are certain exclusions which are provided there. One of the first and the foremost exclusion, તમે જો કંપનીના tax auditor હો, બાકીના કેસીસનું આપણે અત્યારે ડિસ્કસ નહીં કરીએ because of shortage of time. હું કંપનીનો કેસ લઈ લઉં. કંપનીના કેસમાં if you are a tax auditor and if you are not eligible for appointment as an auditor of the said company in accordance with the provisions of Companies Act 2013, તો તમે tax audit નથી કરી શકતા. So the first step that everybody should follow is શું હું આ કંપનીમાં ઓડિટર તરીકે નિમાવા માટે કેપેબલ છું, or am I eligible for it or not, rather than capable. Capable તો હશો, પણ eligible છો કે નહીં, whether you are eligible for appointment as an auditor or not. And that's why it is very important to know what are the provisions of the Companies Act 2013. ખાસું વાઇડ મીનિંગ આપવામાં આવ્યો છે Companies Act 2013 માં, જેમાં there are certain restrictions also. So if I look at the who can be an auditor as per section 141 of Companies Act, એટલે આજે મેં નીચે બધા ક્લોઝિસ લીધા છે in other cases માં, કે relative, officer or employee of the assessee, individual who is a partner, individual who holds interest in security, a person who has direct or indirect business relationship with the taxpayer. આ બધી વસ્તુ ક્યાંથી આવે છે? આ બધી વસ્તુ actually Companies Act માંથી આવે છે, કારણ કે Companies Act નું જે section 141 છે એમાં આ બધા ક્લોઝિસ આપેલા છે. So I have just mentioned that these are clauses which are similar to this. એટલે જો તમે આ બધા relationships હોય with your taxpayer, any of this relationship, in that case you cannot do a tax audit. So if you have a business relationship, તમે એનાથી માલ સામાન ખરીદતા હો, which is not in the ordinary course, then in that case also that could be a potential case of not being eligible to do tax audit. The second point here is very relevant. A person who directly or indirectly renders any services referred to in section 144 to the company or holding company or subsidiary. 144 માં બધી સર્વિસીસ લિસ્ટ ડાઉન કરેલી છે. આમાંથી જો તમે કોઈ પણ સર્વિસીસ આપતા હશો અત્યારે, and it is very necessary for all of us to check this, and why is what I'll discuss in the next minute. તમે અકાઉન્ટિંગ કરતા હો, ઇન્વેસ્ટમેન્ટ એડવાઇઝરી સર્વિસીસ આપતા હો, મેનેજમેન્ટ સર્વિસીસ આપતા હો, ઇન્ટરનલ સિસ્ટમ્સ ડેવલપ કરવા માટેની અસિસ્ટન્સ આપતા હો, ઇન્ટરનલ ઓડિટ કરતા હો, આ બધા કેસીસમાં તમે ટેક્સ ઓડિટ નથી કરી શકવાના. See, we have a tendency as a consultant, we have a tendency to step into the shoes of the client, be very close to the client, and many a times એમાં આપણે જે પ્રોફેશનલ અને પર્સનલ લાઇન ઓફ એ છે ચાઇનીઝ વોલ જે ક્રિએટ કરવી જોઈએ, એ ચાઇનીઝ વોલ ક્રિએટ નથી કરી શકતા. That could come to haunt us, and that's why I'm telling everyone that it is very important before we sign a tax audit report, before we take up a tax audit report, NOC મોકલતા પહેલા we should check whether we are eligible to undertake tax audit. I have mentioned recent cases. તમને ખ્યાલ હશે, in the last 3 weeks time, એક સારી ફર્મના 3 senior partners have received notices and they are barred from undertaking audit practice because NFRA found that they were not maintaining independence. And you will find it very interesting and ironical, but review of tax computation and a review of MAT calculation, આ services પણ જે આપી છે, that could affect an auditor's independence, અને 144 માં management services માં જઈ શકે એવા રેફરન્સ એમાં આપ્યા છે. એટલે જો આપણે ટેક્સ રિટર્ન રિવ્યુ કરવાનું, if you ask me personally, it may not necessarily be that strict, but yes, that is where the authorities are looking at. તમે જો મેનેજમેન્ટ સર્વિસીસ આપતા હશો તો તમે એ ક્લાયન્ટનો ટેક્સ ઓડિટ કરતા પહેલા 10 વાર વિચારવું જોઈએ. મેનેજમેન્ટ સર્વિસીસ ડિફાઇન નથી, એટલે whether I should consider only those services which ideally a management would do, or I am doing certain services જે મેનેજમેન્ટને હેલ્પ કરે છે. How do I define that? There is a very thin line of difference, and that's why it is very important. નીરવ મોદીના કેસમાં પણ આપણને ખ્યાલ હશે, પહેલું જે પકડાયો હતો that was the tax auditor for all his companies, for all the group companies, અને એ ભાઈ અત્યારે જેલમાં છે. So tax auditor is also being caught for various lapses on his part, and that's why I would say eligibility to undertake tax audit is something that we must ensure before we take up something. અને હવે ટાઈમ આવી ગયો છે કે આપણે થોડા સિરિયસલી આપણા પ્રોફેશનને લઈએ, and because it is to safeguard us and our profession, that line of independence has to be there. Only then you should do tax audit. Somebody is unmute. Now we move on to the last part of it, which is section 44AD ADA. 44AB પર આપણે સારું એવું ડિસ્કશન કર્યું. We'll move on to 44AD ADA, whether section 44AA applies. Section 44AA, there is a clear reference in 44AA કે 44AD ના કેસમાં books of accounts maintain કરવાની જરૂર નથી. Only when you breach 44AD subsection 4, there is a need to maintain books of accounts. And so it is quite clear. Income tax department ના FAQs પણ છે જે બહુ clearly કહે છે કે if you are going for presumptive taxation under 44AD, you do not need to maintain books of accounts. 44ADA માં the difference here is while it will not make much of a difference in terms of the final answer, but just to let you know how one reads the law, 44AD માં જે વાત કરી છે એમાં 44AA24 જેવો કોઈ પ્રોવિઝન નથી. So there is no provision in 44AA which clearly requires certain professionals to maintain books of accounts. 44AD એના કોન્ટેક્સ્ટમાં. However, 44ADA4 જ્યારે આપણે વાંચીએ છીએ ત્યારે ત્યાં બહુ ક્લિયરલી લખ્યું છે કે only when you are breaching 44AD, in that case you need to maintain books of accounts. So more or less I think it is agreeable that books of accounts would be necessary only when one breaches the provisions. The question that one always asks, ke tax officer ne કેટલી right છે to verify my books if I am going by presumptive taxation? That is a question which is hurting everybody. કારણ કે જો મારે હું 6% કે 8% અથવા 50% if I am offering it, can a tax officer then further go into verification of my claim? Can he do that? If you look at the income tax return, when in the context of a presumptive basis business or profession, they ask for 8 items, 8 details: gross receipts, gross profit, expenses, net profit, debtors, creditors, stock in trade, and a cash balance. So while on the one hand the government wants to ease the method of doing business in India, the government wants you to there should be a leeway not to maintain books of accounts, but on the other hand what they are doing is હવે રિટર્નમાં એ લોકો બધી ડિટેલ્સ માંગતા થઈ ગયા છે. એટલે રિટર્નમાં તમારે આ બધી ડિટેલ્સ તો આપવી જ પડશે, even if you are not maintaining books of accounts. અને જો આટલી જ મહેનત કરવાની હોય તો why would not one maintain books of account? So the sheer purpose of giving that relaxation goes away with this much requirement. અને પ્લસ હવે આપણે જો વાત કરીએ 44AD અને 44ADA માં તો એ કહે છે કે 6% or such higher amount as is claimed by the taxpayer. Why would a taxpayer claim a higher amount? જો books of accounts maintain ideally નથી કરવાની તો હું ગણતરી કરીને કેવી રીતે કહું કે મારી 8% થાય છે કે 10% થાય છે? And why should I? So that is a question. Now looking at the effect of amendments, digital turnover, when I say digital I mean banking turnover. Don't confuse it with pure digital. I am saying non-cash turnover, digital turnover and non-digital turnover. How to segregate profits? If you look at the return જે મેં નીચે લીધું છે 61 માં 0.2 નો A અને B is very relevant. 0.2 નો A અને B, it says digital banking channels થી જે turnover થયું છે 6% of the amount claimed to have been earned or the amount claimed to have been earned. So what it says is તમે digital turnover ના 6% કેલ્ક્યુલેટ કરો, એની સામે એનામાંથી actual નફો કેટલો થયો છે એ કમ્પેર કરો ને એ amount લખો. Similarly non digital એટલે cash transactions માં તમારે કેટલી નફો થયો છે 8% લેખે અને એમાં તમારો actual નફો કેટલો થયો છે એ લખો. એ બંનેનું જે હાયર હશે એ બહાર આવશે. So what the government is trying to do is they are asking us that for digital turnover tell me the profit and for cash turnover tell me the profitability. This is complete nuisance is what I feel. It cannot be like this. Coming to another question, whether digital turnover and cash turnover, one can say that I will go for 44AD only for digital turnover, not for cash turnover. No, it has to be specific to a business. Eligible business માં તમારે digital turnover અલગ છે અને cash turnover અલગ છે. So you cannot segregate them. If you don't fulfill, then તમારે tax audit કરાવવું પડશે. One small point here, time limit for determining the deemed profit. એટલે જે આગળ આપણે વાત કરી 6% અને 8%ની. So એ જે 6% ની વાત છે, for that the amount has to be received before the due date of filing tax return. Please remember, it is not on or before the due date, it is before the due date. એટલે 30 નવેમ્બર due date છે તો 29 નવેમ્બર સુધીમાં તમે 19-20ની કેટલી આવક બેન્કિંગ ચેનલ્સથી રિકવર કરી છે એની ડિટેલ્સ તમારે કમ્પેર કરવાની છે અને એની ઉપર 6% લેખે તમને deemed profits મળશે. So that is something that one needs to consider. I have taken one example here. I think we are left with 4 slides. We'll try to finish it soon. Miss Y is a taxpayer. She is engaged in business. Broadly, she feels that she is earning 7% taxable profits from business. All receipts so far in the year have been through normal banking channels. As on 31st March, એમનો એક receivable ઉભો છે of 1.2 crores. She provided business માંથી receipts થવાની છે amounting to 1.2 crores. Generally શું હોય કે 44AD નો આપણો કેસ હોય તો the due date is 31st of July and then tax audit comes later on. એટલે હું રિટર્ન ભરતી વખત સુધીમાં અને આ વસ્તુ કેવી છે આ એક જ વર્ષ માટે લાગુ પડવાની છે, but any interesting proposition, so I put it here. 31st જુલાઈ હોય તો ત્યાં સુધીમાં તો મારી ગણતરી થઈ જાય કે મારું રિટર્ન ભરતા પહેલા કેટલું ડિજિટલ ટર્નઓવર થયું છે. In this particular year, the due date of tax audit is 31st October and the due date for tax return continues to be 30th November. એમાં 31st July નું કારણ કે આપણને ખ્યાલ છે કે એક્સટેન્શન આવી ગયું છે. So now the due date is 30th November. So મારું ટેક્સ ઓડિટ તો 31 ઓક્ટોબરે પતી જવાનું છે જો મારે કરવાનું આવશે તો. અને મારું જે રિકવરેબલ છે, if I don't receive it by 31st October and if I receive it in the last month of November, how do I do it? Should I delay my tax audit? Should I wait till 29th November? Or should I undertake tax audit on a conservative basis? So this was an interesting proposition which I thought I'll bring to the notice of the audience. The next point is whether ICDS applies. Chicken and egg situation છે 44AB માટે. What does 44AB say? It says whether gross receipts, sales or turnover. ICDS says, the notification છે ICDS no, it says ICDS shall apply in case of an individual and an HUF who are eligible to 44AB. એટલે 44AB માં ફોલ થતા હોય તો ICDS કરવાનું છે. પણ vice versa હવે આપણે જોઈએ કે 44AB કરવા માટે મારે ICDS ફોલો કરવા પડશે. As I said, it's a chicken and an egg situation. Generally, till the time ICDS was brought in, what was the thought process? The thought process was कि मारे books of accounts पर जवानों से, and I'll follow the books of accounts. I'll look at the turnover, and that is what is written in guidance note also, para 5.20 માં कि books of accounts जो turnover છે એના basis પર તમે determine કરો. But guidance note is 2014 pre ICDS. ICDS, that is the question. Do we get a hint when we read 44AD? 44AD માટે there is a clear FAQ by CBDT. કારણ કે the language that is used is the same, gross receipts or turnover. બંનેમાં 44AD અને ADA માં it's like gross receipts or gross turnover. So for that CBDT says that for 44AD you have to follow ICDS. એટલે for example તમારો service transactions છે, and if there is a difference between the revenue as per ICDS, revenue as per accounting standards, similarly for example construction contracts or any other kind of work that you do, if there is some बहुत ઓછા cases છે જેમાં turnover will be different, but yes there are cases where it is possible, and therefore મારે turnover કયું ગણવું, ICDS પ્રમાણે કે books પ્રમાણે? And if for 44AD I have to take it as per ICDS, a corollary would be કે for 44AB apply થાય કે નહીં એ determine કરવા માટે પણ મારે ICDS પ્રમાણે turnover ગણવું પડશે એકવાર માટે, અને બાકીના ICDS જે છે એ પાછળથી લાગુ પડશે. So that is the thought process. Whether 44ADA and 44AD are applicable to non-specified professionals. આપણે જોયું હતું 44AD જે છે, 44AD talks about eligible business to start with. 44ADA only covers 44AA1 professions. એના સિવાયના જે professions હોય છે સારા એવા રહેશે, whether those will get covered under 44D, 44AD or 44ADA. એક વસ્તુ તો ક્લિયર છે કે 44ADA માં they are not going to get covered. That is very clear. Can one say that 44AD માં cover થઈ શકે? Now here there is again an interesting proposition. જે મેં પહેલા 44AD6 ની વાત કરી હતી, a person engaged in business, a person engaged in profession under 44AA1, જે exclusion છે 44AD માં, that exclusion is provided only to a person who is carrying out profession specified in 44AA. So if a person is carrying out a profession which is not specified in 44AA1, can I take an interpretation to say that 44AD ma fall thai just and I can take a benefit? I inference possible lage chhe. There are authors who have given this view. However, the logical view that appears is that you cannot claim either under 44AD or 44ADA, because business is different from profession. Once you say that you are into business, then in that case you cannot claim 44AD. 44AD ADA partners of a firm are thodo interesting છે. Will directly plunge onto the second bullet. The second bullet says taxability of partners remuneration and interest. પહેલા કેવું હતું, 44AD માં there was a specific subsection which said that you will get deduction for partners remuneration, જે 40B માં વાત કરે છે. However, that was removed. So now with that removal, what is the impact on taxability of the partners remuneration? એમના હાથમાં શું થશે? I'm not talking about applicability to a partner right now. I'm talking about what will happen to the partner. How will he be taxed? A case ma interesting. Section 28(5) and 40B no je interplay hai, that is very crucial. A partner's remuneration 44AD એવું કહે છે કે all the expenses which are allowable under section 30 to 38 shall be deemed to be allowed. એની કોરોલરી એવી આવે કે જેટલા ડિસઅલાઉન્સીસ પણ બાકીની સેક્શન્સમાં છે ડિસઅલાઉન્સ પણ ડીમ થઈ ગયા. So when you look at the amounts eligible for 30 to 30D, they are subject to the disallowances. So when you are saying that you have allowed all the deductible expenditure, that means you have factored the disallowances. And when you look at 28.5, it very categorically says કે જેટલો ખર્ચો મને 40B માં જે લિમિટ્સ આપી છે ત્યાં સુધી જો મળ્યો હોય તો જ મારો ટેક્સ થશે PGBP માં. And that's why the interesting proposition, can one say that now with the removal of that reference, it can be assumed that the whole amount has been disallowed. And that's why, and in fact, the memorandum helps me. હું જ્યારે memorandum વાંચું છું આ removal, memorandum says that we do not want to provide any deduction for partner's remuneration. That means you are not allowing it. Once it is not allowed, then the partner, can a partner take a claim that because my amount was not disallowed in the hands of, was disallowed completely in the hands of the firm, I should not be taxed in my hands. I think there's a strong chance to argue that the partner should not be taxable in his hands. Can a partner of a firm opt for 44AD, 44ADA? આપણે 44AB ના કોન્ટેક્સ્ટમાં જોયું હતું. There is one judgment by Chennai ITED wherein it says that no, a partner of a firm cannot opt for 44AD. 44AD ના કોન્ટેક્સ્ટમાં હતું, and there it says that a partner of a firm cannot opt for 44AD. They say that section 28 only provides for a charging mechanism, જે આપણે પહેલા વાત થઈ. Here it deviates from the other three judgments in the context of 44AB. Here it says that you are not eligible. એટલે જ્યારે taxpayer benefit અપાવવાનો હોય ત્યારે ITED says that no, nothing doing, you are not eligible. જ્યારે tax audit કરાવવાનું હોય there you are still a businessman and you are a professional and you need to do your tax audit. That is the approach that the ITEDs have taken. But I think in fact in this particular case of Chennai ITED, they had referred to Sagar Datta's judgment, which I referred earlier. But still they said that that was in context of 44AB. એટલે અમે આમાં એને લાગુ ના કરી શકે. I feel that is quite weird and vague. The principle remains the same. It's about gross receipts. It's about a person carrying on a business, a person carrying on a profession. In my view, it should be possible that a partner of a firm should be eligible to go for 44AD or 44ADA. આજે જ એક જજમેન્ટ આવ્યું છે, very interesting judgment of a Google employee. Google employee ના કેસમાં એવું હતું કે he was an employee તરીકે છૂટો થઈને પછી એણે પોતાની કન્સલ્ટન્સી આપવાની ચાલુ કરી Google ને. And from the consultancy income, he claimed certain expenses. 44ADA પહેલાની વાત છે, prior to 44ADA. He said that એક તો legal question જે છે કે can a profession claim expenses? પહેલો જ ક્વેશ્ચન છે. એક ક્વેશ્ચનના કોન્ટેક્સ્ટમાં જજમેન્ટ છે કે the tax officer said that the person has not been able to show that he has incurred expenses. એની સામે જજમેન્ટ એવું આવ્યું છે કે આ વ્યક્તિ કન્સલ્ટન્સી સર્વિસીસ આપે છે તો it is very natural, બહુ સ્વાભાવિક છે કે that person would have incurred certain expenses. And there they are relying now or taking recourse to the new provision of section 44ADA અને એ લોકોને 50% ખર્ચા બાદ આપ્યા in this judgment, which I have not brought on my slide because it has just come before the session. So એમાં એવું કહેવામાં આવ્યું છે કે a person who is carrying on profession should get deduction of 50% of expenses, because in the future we have brought out a section 44ADA જેમાં 50% પર જ tax લાગે છે. Very interesting. I have not read the judgment in detail. I have just rushed through the judgment, but it seems to be a very interesting judgment which could be useful. This is the last topic for today. I've shot beyond time, but because it is highly complex, I decided to take it up towards the end of the session. 4 or 5 provisions which are very relevant. This is all about the interplay between 44AB and 44AD. I think this is what a lot of you were waiting for, and that's why I'll take some time on this, 5 to 10 minutes. 44ABD. I would like to focus you on each of these provisions because then we are going to the example. 44ABD talks about profession, it talks about 44ADA, and it says that if a person under 44ADA has claimed income to be lower than the profits, then the person has to undertake tax audit. So remember that a profession 44ADA, lower than deemed profits, taxable. Carrying on business shall, if the provisions of 44AD4, see here they are, why I have kept 44ABD and 44ABE together. One is related to profession, the other one is related to business, but the language is very different. 44ABE talks about business, and it says that if 44AD4 is applicable and the income exceeds the maximum amount which is not chargeable to tax, to tax audit lagse. So આ બે વસ્તુ ધ્યાન રાખવાની છે, એક profession, એક business. then we look at the first proviso to section 44AB. Here it says આ first proviso શેના માટે છે તો કહે છે કે જે 44AD માં જેણે 2 કરોડથી ઓછી આવક છે અને 44AD પ્રમાણે પ્રોફિટ્સ ડિક્લેર કર્યા છે એ લોકોને આ બેનિફિટ મળશે. એ લોકોને આ સેક્શન અપ્લાય નહીં થાય ટેક્સ ઓડિટની. That is what they are saying by way of a proviso. So એ proviso પણ relevant થશે. પછી આપણે આવીએ 4484 જે આપણે ઉપર જોયું. What does 4484 say? It says that where an eligible assessee declares profit for any previous year in accordance with the provisions of this section, and he declares profit for any of the 5 assessment years relevant to succeeding such year, not in accordance with the provision of subsection 1. એટલે હું આજે ક્લેમ કરું છું, હું પહેલા વર્ષે ક્લેમ કરું છું અને પછી આવતા વર્ષે હું ક્લેમ નથી કરતો, તો પછીના 5 વર્ષ સુધી I will not be able to claim this. આજે આપણે સ્ટાર્ટિંગમાં એલિજિબલ અસેસી વાંચ્યું હતું કે એલિજિબલ વર્ડ કેમ યુઝ કર્યો છે, ઓપ્ટ ઇન ઓપ્ટ આઉટ વાળો ક્રાઇટેરિયા છે. સો હું આજે ઓપ્ટ કરું, કાલે ઓપ્ટ ના કરું, તો પછી હું 5 વર્ષ માટે ઓપ્ટ નહીં કરી શકું. સો ધેટ ઇઝ વોટ 4484 સેઝ. અને એ પર્સપેક્ટિવથી આપણે ઉપરનું જે છે 44ABE એ વાંચવું રહેશે. ધેટ વિલ બી રેલેવન્ટ. અને 4485 એવું કહે છે ઇટ ઇઝ ધ સેમ થિંગ વિચ ઇઝ ધેર ઇન 44ABE. ઇટ સેઝ કે તમે ફોર્મમાં ફોલ થતા હો અને તમારી ઇન્કમ એક્સીડ થઈ જતી હોય તો તમારે બુક્સ ઓફ અકાઉન્ટ્સ રાખવા પડશે અને તમારે ટેક્સ ઓડિટ કરાવવું પડશે. These are the 5 jumbling provisions, if I would put it that way, with which I would like to take up the example. Just a second. Okay, so this is the first case. I'll try to cover up the whole picture here. In the first case, in year 1, the turnover is 50 lakh, which means I am below the threshold for 44AD. However, my profit is 2,60,000 only, which is not the minimum profit which is required as per 44AD. And that's why I'm not eligible for 44AD. Whether I will be liable to tax audit, આપણે આગળ શું જોયું કે પહેલું જે પ્રોફેશનની વાત કરે છે એમાં એવું કહે છે કે તમે 44ADA વાળા હો અને તમે લોઅર ઇન્કમ ઓફર કરી તો તમારે ટેક્સ ઓડિટ કરાવવું પડે. However, એ ક્લોઝ બિઝનેસને લાગુ નથી પડતો. Had it been a profession, અને આજથી 4 વર્ષ પહેલા જો બિઝનેસની વાત જે અમેન્ડમેન્ટ આવ્યું છે, prior to 4 years, if you would have looked at the law, the same provision was applicable to business, જે પહેલું લખ્યું છે. પણ હવે ચેન્જ થઈ ગયું છે. Now that only applies to profession. So if I was in a profession અને હું profits 50% ના દેખાડતો તો મારે tax audit કરાવવું પડતું. But if I am falling under 44AD and this is the first year and I am not able to show that much profit, કારણ કે 4484 શું કહે છે કે પહેલા વર્ષે ક્લેમ કર્યું છે અને બીજા વર્ષે ક્લેમ નથી કર્યું. મારા કેસમાં શું છે, પહેલું જ વર્ષ છે and I have not claimed, and that's why 4484 doesn't apply. And that's why મારી જે 1 કરોડની કે 5 કરોડની લિમિટ છે એ જોવાની છે. That's why 44AB doesn't apply. Year 2, again turnover is 50 lakh, હું 6% પ્રોફિટ કરું છું. We are assuming in the whole example કે બધું બેન્કિંગ ચેનલ્સ થ્રુ છે. So we are assuming 6% profit. મારો 44AD માં ફોલ થાય છે કારણ કે મારો કેસ 44AD માં ફોલ થાય છે અને બીકોઝ જે સબસિક્વન્ટ 5 વર્ષ ના કરી શકું ઓપ્ટ એ કેસ મારામાં અપ્લાય નથી થતો એનું કારણ એ છે કે 4484 એવું કહે છે કે પહેલા મેં અપ્લાય કર્યું હોવું જોઈએ, and that is why in the second year I am able to claim 44AD. So very important difference. Otherwise I would not have been able to claim જો એ પહેલા વર્ષની વાત ના કરતો તો. So here I can claim 44AD. Whether I am required to do 44AB? No. First proviso જે આપણે જોયો, the third bullet, it says that where a person declares profits in a previous year in accordance with the provisions of subsection 1 and his sales is less than 2 crore, તો tax audit નથી કરાવવું. So that's why મારું turnover 50 લાખ છે, હું 6% ઓફર કરું છું, એટલે I am out because of the proviso. Come year 3, I have a turnover of 60 lakh, I make a profit of 3,60,000, again 6%. Whether 44AD? Yes, same. Year 4, very interesting. Now my turnover is 2 crore 50 lakh. 2 crore 50 lakh છે, મારો પ્રોફિટ છે 8 લાખ રૂપિયા. 44AD મને અપ્લાય નથી થતું. Very interesting. What is happening is because I am crossing the threshold of 2 crore in the definition of eligible business, I am not able to claim 44AD. It is not that I have declared profits lesser than what is mentioned in 44AD. I am not eligible and hence this is not applicable. And that's why 4484 નું reading આપણે જો કરીએ, and because of shortage of time I will not read through, but I would request, I will share this presentation, you can go through that example, read through 4484, it's very crucial. So it says that not applicable છે. Ideally કેવું થાય કે મારું જો 4484 apply થઈ જશે in that case 44AB ma I will have to do tax audit. But here what is happening is, it is not a case where I'm into an eligible business. It is that my turnover has crossed 2 crores. So I'm out of the purview of 4484. And that's why my turnover continues to be less than 5 crores. And that's why I am not exigible to tax audit. Very critical. Similarly, now look at the year 5, 2 crores turnover. I'm showing 6% profit. Can I claim tax? Can I claim 44AD? જો આપણે 5 વર્ષ વાળો ક્રાઇટેરિયા લીધો હોત તો કદાચ હું અપ્લાય ના કરી શકતો. But as I said, in the earlier year, it was not applicable. It is not the case where I have opted out. I have not opted out. My turnover did not meet. એક વ્યૂ કોઈ લઈ શકે છે, and I am agreeing to that there could be one view કે મારું turnover એકવાર cross થઈ ગયું, that means મેં breach કર્યું છે. However, if you look at the intent and the memorandum માં પણ example આપ્યો છે, and there they are referring to the example of 1 crore rupees throughout the example. That with the intent, if you read, તમે સ્મોલ બિઝનેસ છો અને તમે એમાંથી ઓપ્ટ આઉટ કર્યું છે, તમે એનાથી ઓછી આવક દેખાડી છે, તો જ આ પ્રોવિઝન અપ્લાય થશે 4484. And that's why in year 5 I will be eligible for 44AD, and that's why I don't have to do a tax audit. See, year 6, 7 ને 8 ની વાત કરું, મારું year 6 અને 7 ની પહેલા વાત કરીએ તો મારું turnover is in year 6 my turnover is 4 crores. એની ઉપર હું 4 crores છે, એટલે again I am not eligible for 44AD. કારણ કે 5 કરોડથી ઓછું છે એટલે મારે 44AB નથી કરાવવાનું. Year 7, 6 crore. એની ઉપર again I am not eligible for 44AD, પણ હવે મારે tax audit કરાવવું પડશે કારણ કે મારું turnover crosses 5 crores. So in year 7 I will have to do a tax audit. Come year 8, my turnover is 2 crore 50 lakh, ઓછું થઈ ગયું મારું turnover અને ફરીથી હું eligible નથી, and that's why I don't do it. So here also I am not eligible. If you look at 44AD in year 8, I am not eligible, and hence I am not doing. કારણ કે મારી 2 કરોડથી ઓછી નથી turnover. Come year 9, now it is crucial. Year 9 માં turnover is 1 crore 75 lakh. એની ઉપર profit છે 2,40,000. Now I am here there is a breach of 4484, or here 4484 comes into play. Here my turnover is 1 crore 75 lakh. I am not fulfilling the 6% criteria. That's why firstly આ વર્ષમાં તો હું eligible નહીં જ થઉં for 44AD benefit. But because એમાં 44AB માં there is no requirement કે મારે 44AB કરાવવું પડશે, એટલે આ વર્ષે પણ મને tax audit નહીં લાગે. So my turnover criteria still helps me in this case. હવે હું એના પછીના વર્ષમાં જોઉં, એના પછીના વર્ષમાં મેં, કારણ કે see criteria શું હતો કે એના 5 વર્ષ પછી, in the earlier years I was either not eligible or I had claimed. There was not a no case. Now coming to year 10, I have a turnover of 2 crores which is within the limits. I have profits of 6%, 12 lakh, but still I am not eligible for 44AD. The reason is because of 4484. It says કે in આગળના વર્ષોમાં તમે એક વર્ષમાં જો ક્લેમ નથી કર્યું, so you have claimed in year 5. In year 5 there is a yes. એના પછીના 5 વર્ષમાં, that is in year 9. In year 9 you are not able to show that, and that's why from year 10 for 5 years you will not be able to do it. અને આ છે 44AD નો breach, and because I am breaching the provisions of 44AD, that's why tax audit becomes applicable as per 44ABE. Year 9 માં why was tax audit not, કદાચ મેં કવર નથી કર્યું, year 9 માં tax audit apply કેમ નહોતું થતું? Very interesting. What does that say? 44ABE, it says if the provisions of 4484 are applicable and his income exceeds the maximum amount which is not chargeable to income tax. In this particular case in year 9 મેં breach તો કર્યું છે, 4484 apply તો થાય છે, પણ મારી income તમે જોશો, if you assume it to be 2,40,000, it does not exceed 2,50,000, and that's why I still continue to be out of the purview of tax audit. In year 10, because મારું બધું fulfill થાય છે, but because I have breached in year 9, in year 10 I will not be out of tax audit and I will not be able to claim 44AD. It's a web, I completely understand, but there was no better way of showing this than by way of an example of 10 years, so that we understand how it applies. It has an interplay of various sections. The last example is a resident individual businessman, an eligible assessee opted for 44AD in year 1. For year 2 the turnover is INR 90 lakh. Now for year 2 the turnover is INR 90 lakh, and there is a tax loss of INR 50,000. So my overall loss છે 50,000 નો. Can I be out of the purview of tax audit? The answer seems yes. However, જો મારી 4 લાખની આવક હોત, taxable income 4 લાખ હોત, 2.5 લાખથી વધી ગઈ, તો મારે tax audit કરાવવું પડે છે, because I'm not fulfilling the requirement. So here it becomes quite it's unintended consequence. તમે લેંગ્વેજ જોશો તો કહે છે કે ઇન્કમ ચાર્જેબલ ટુ ટેક્સ થી તમારું ઓછું હોય તો તમારે ટેક્સ ઓડિટ નહીં કરાવવાનું. Now if I am having a loss, if I keep on showing loss, હું સામે ચાલીને લોસ જ બતાવું, તો does that mean I am out of the purview of tax audit? No, that appears unintended, but that is how the law has been drafted. Maybe they could have used the term gross receipts in place of income chargeable to tax or some other parameter, but here they have used the income as per tax law, which could lead to unintended consequences. As concluding remarks, what I would suggest is verification of tax audit has become very critical. Applicability of tax audit is all the more cumbersome now. We have to analyze the whole situation. Second is the role and responsibilities of a tax auditor. As I mentioned in one of my slides earlier, it is very important to ensure that we focus on our role and responsibilities as tax auditors. It is not just a mere signing procedure. It is much beyond that. If you look at the order in the case of CA Uday and Sen by NFRA, I insist that one reads through the 88-page judgment, which very clearly demonstrates how an auditor does not demonstrate in certain cases. While I'm not totally in sync with that judgment, but yes, for all of us, it is very relevant to just read through so that we at least know the caution points. We at least know the points which we need to factor when we are doing the tax audit in terms of the independence. And કાલે ઉઠીને કોઈ પણ કંપની ખાડે જશે તો આપણી ઉપર નામ ના આવે, એ વસ્તુ ધ્યાનમાં રાખવા માટે what is it that we need to take care is something that we need to be prepared. As I said earlier, the tax audit will now be mapped with the income tax return. 143(1) માં પણ difference ના આવે, difference આવશે તો demand આવશે. એટલે how do you map that strategically, ensuring that કાલે ઉઠીને assessment માં પણ issue ના આવે, that is very critical. The whole idea of preponing the due date of tax audit is pre-filled ITRs. The government is soon going to come up with ITRs which will be pre-filled with certain data from the tax audit report. એકવાર tax audit report માં નખાઈ ગયું તો એ જ વસ્તુ return માં આવી જશે and you will not be able to change it. Maybe for the first couple of years they will not make it mandatory, but going forward they will just fill the cell, freeze it. You will not be able to change it. Tax audit becomes very important. As I said, the government is now providing detailed ITR forms and tax audit forms with notes. It shows the thought process of the government. See, we are also no less. We also try to take advantage of the loopholes of the law. So what the government has tried to do is the government has tried to inculcate something that is not written in the law in the ITR form, in the tax audit form. એટલે એમાં તમને નોટ તરીકે લખી દે ભાઈ આની અંદર તમારે કેપિટલ ટ્રાન્ઝેક્શન્સ પણ ફેક્ટર કરવાના છે. Can one argue that you are going beyond law? Maybe yes, but at least that shows the intent of the government. So one has to go through the forms in great detail before taking a call. With this, I end my session. I hope it was useful and there was a lot of information that got shared. I hope people were able to digest it. I'll be more than happy to take questions. I think it's already 7:20. So
thank you, Dhaval bhai. It was a wonderful session and you have tried honestly to give your extraordinary knowledge to the participants. So thank you very much once again. If you permit me, we have a 3 question. You can also see in a question answer. I can read for you. So one question is from Sri Prakash from Ahmedabad. What is turnover for the purpose of section 44AD? Whether turnover includes indirect taxes like GST?
See, ideally, and again, I would request that whatever is my view, ultimately what the institute has mentioned in the guidance note should prevail, and there is a very clear guidance which has been provided in terms of including GST for the purpose of section 44AD. Ideally, the exclusive method is what one should factor, but because the income tax law also mandates you to have an inclusive method for certain purposes, that is also not beyond doubt. But in my view, exclusive method is what one can follow. However, please follow the guidance note for undertaking this.
Thank you. Another question is from Sri Etal Shah. My turnover is say rupees 60 lakh in FY 1920 and net profit comes around 1.5 lakh after claiming expenses in profit and loss account. As net profit is below 8% of turnover, whether need to do audit under section 44AD?
See, if you are, these are just numbers. Can I just come back because there's a numbers and I'll have to do some working and then come back.
Not an issue.
Sure.
Not an issue. Another question is from CA Ravi Shah. He has asked three questions. One question in three questions. So I'll read. I'll read it all. Partner has received remuneration of rupees 2 crore from his firm. Whether tax audit is applicable whether tax audit is applicable. I mean
Right.
more than rupees 2 crore. And the third question is, can I claim deduction of partner's interest and remuneration to the maximum extent permissible while filing return under section 44AD?
Okay. So we'll just try and understand the case first. I'll take the first point first. It says partner has received a remuneration of 2 crores from his firm. So I'm assuming this is a professional firm, or should I assume it is a business?
No, it's a business.
It's a business, and that's why the limit of 2 crores. Fine. So see, as I mentioned in one of my slides, tax audit, whether a partner is carrying out business or not, that is what we need to understand. Generally, a partnership firm and the partner are not separate. So what a partner does is actually what the firm does. So if a firm is doing business, then a partner is also doing business. One may try to argue that partner is only a person working on behalf of the firm. That is a possible argument that one can take, that he is not carrying out business. But it will be a very weak argument to take, especially considering that the share remuneration of a partner from a firm gets taxed under profits and gains from business or profession. With that, if the remuneration crosses 2 crores, then in that case, tax audit should apply. I'm assuming that 5% or more of the receipts are in cash. Otherwise, the turnover limit would be 5 crores. And the last question is, can I claim deduction of partner's interest and remuneration to the maximum extent permissible while filing return? So you are a partnership firm. I'm assuming this is from the perspective of a partnership firm. So partnership firm is filing return under 44AD. Can I claim deduction of partner's interest and remuneration? Because of the memorandum that brought in the amendment to section 44AD, whereby the subsection relating to allowability of partner's remuneration has been removed, and it has been very categorically mentioned in the memorandum that we never intended to give this benefit. We did not want, and we do not want, and hence we are removing this. Because of that, I believe that the correct position is to not claim no benefit available. But as I said, correspondingly, should the partner offer it? If I am taking a position that this amount is not allowed to the firm, can the partner say that it is not a taxable income, because 28.5 only refers to the amount which is allowed under 40B. So I can always say that it is not allowed, and that's why my income is not taxable. That is how one can strategically decide a position.
Thank you, Dhaval bhai. Friends, Dhaval bhai has already said that he will definitely share his sheet PowerPoint presentation to us. And now I request CA Monish bhai, Vice President of Chartered Accountant Association Ahmedabad, to give his vote of thanks.
Dhaval bhai, it was indeed a splendid show by you. I'm sure that whatever clarity was required in 44AB and AD, both have been dispensed of by you in a wonderful fashion. And I'm sure that the participants have enjoyed it to the most. And thank you for taking that extra time and also trying and solving all the questions that have come up. I thank you, sir, first of all, for such a great and I would also thank all the participants who have spared time to intellect and to understand the most important sections. And as Dhaval bhai pointed out, now it's the burden upon us as chartered accountants to make sure that whatever audits that we do should be of quality and of good points. And that's with that, I think I'll thank each and everyone for sparing such a wonderful time. Thank you all.
Thank you, Monish bhai. Thank you, Monish bhai, for a wonderful vote of thanks. And friends, now it's an end to another wonderful session. And friends, please do not forget to log in at 4 p.m. Tomorrow we have a wonderful session on GST of 3 hours, time, value, and supply under GST by Dr. CA Gaurav Gupta. So please do not miss it, and we will definitely meet tomorrow. Thank you so much. We are ending this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Dhaval.
Thank you.